Hey, welcome back everybody. Happy Monday. Hope we're having a wonderful start to the week out there. And we've got a lot going on out there, from a very active scene in the tropics to very active severe weather potential back home. Again, we've got a lot to discuss in today's video. Now, if you haven't already subscribed, definitely consider doing so and like the video. Both of those things do a lot in helping the channel grow and helping us reach more people and kind of get the word out about this active weather pattern. And I think, honestly, this is probably the start of a trend here for the next month or two, especially as we get deeper into hurricane season. And again, August through really October, that's kind of the prime time, and we're now within the last couple days of July, so really getting towards that time frame. Also, on a goal side of things, we are trying to get to 10,000 subscribers by the end of hurricane season, and we've gained a good 200 or so just in the past couple weeks. So again, very grateful for everyone who has definitely hit that subscribe button. Again, it means a lot and helps the channel out as well. Now, with all of that said, we need to start talking about the weather here because, again, we've got a lot to discuss, and we'll start right with the tropics, which, again, I'm sure a lot of you clicked on the video for. But, again, if you are here for that severe weather threat, don't fret. Go ahead and we will talk about that later on in the video, which will be put down below in the timestamp. So you're not going to hurt my feelings if you want to skip ahead to do that. But starting with the tropics, again, kind of this little area kind of right in here is what has been the big story within the past couple of days, as some of our models have begun to develop this in the medium range. Now, again, you're probably watching and you're thinking, well, you've been talking about this for 3 or 4 days and it looks just as ugly now as it did then. Well, that was expected. At the end of the day, we're not expecting true development with this until likely the end of this work week going into this weekend. So the good news with that is we've got plenty of time to monitor it. The not so great news is if it were to form now, we would be able to collect data a little bit earlier and probably nail that forecast down a little bit sooner compared to where it is likely going to develop closer to home. So again, kind of a catch-22 there, but either way, we are going to give you the latest data and show you everything we know. Now, that's not the only thing. We do also have some low pressure spinning off the northeast coast. In fact, I'm going to draw that in a different color so you can see it better. But again, low pressure up here just off the coast of New England. That is spinning inland and has brought some cooler air for some folks. Again, as we are getting some of that flow right off of the northern Atlantic here. So making it feel a little bit nicer out there for some of you folks, but also brought some rain with it. Another thing you'll notice, kind of hard to see on satellite imagery here, but we've got a big complex of storms here working on through portions of the Midwest currently. And that is going to set the tone and the theme for what is to come here throughout the next couple of days, as we're going to get rounds of these complexes of storms over much of the eastern half of the country that could produce destructive winds, some tornadoes, and hail as well. So that's kind of what we're seeing on satellite right now. Again, that's kind of what we're looking at. Now, as for the latest data from the National Hurricane Center, we have had the chances of development bumped up from yesterday. Yesterday we were at 40% chance. Now we are at a 50% chance from the NHC. So again, becoming slightly more confident. And again, I said a couple days ago, we probably won't hit a likely territory for development until really this Wednesday, I would imagine. Maybe tomorrow evening at the earliest, I would think. But again, the models are in agreement mostly that we're going to see some sort of development with this. It's just a matter of how strong is it going to get, and really what track is it going to take is going to be just as important to that forecast. And unfortunately, we don't really have a lot of answers to that right now. We do have a pretty good idea, though, of what the possibilities are. It's just a matter of which one of those possibilities will this system take. But again, no development expected within the next 3 or 4 days, really. But once we get kind of to Thursday, Friday, and especially Saturday, Sunday of this weekend, development is going to be much more likely with this system. Somewhere in the Bahamas, near Florida, Cuba, and Hispaniola, potentially in the extreme eastern parts of the Gulf of Mexico as well, could be where the storm finally develops. Again, though, we'll look at those possibilities here in just a second. The best way to do that is go ahead and just start looking at some model guidance. So we'll start with the European, then we'll take a look at some other models, including the Canadian, the American, and the German model, and let you know kind of what we're thinking here. So again, the European has been the most consistent out of any of the models. We'll start this off going into this Wednesday. Here we go. Here's that wave. At this point, finally getting into a bit more of a favorable environment. So Wednesday afternoon onward is when the chances of development are going to begin. But really, again, I think Friday, Saturday, and even maybe Thursday are going to be the most likely times that we see this system develop. But here we go again, starting on Wednesday. There it is, that area of blue on your map. And you'll notice as we bring this into Thursday afternoon here, we've still got that area of blue. And oftentimes, what happens, without getting too deep into the meteorology of it, is these tropical waves are more likely to form when they're next to some sort of land, just due to the way that the spin works with some of these mountains over Hispaniola. This will likely help to allow the system to finally gain that core and that center of circulation. In fact, you'll even notice here how kind of the wave axis here is kind of right, connected to the mountains there of Haiti and the Dominican Republic. But oftentimes what happens is we get some of that vorticity over the mountains here, and that kind of gets fed into or ingested by the wave, and then low pressure is finally able to form. And we see that here on the European. We finally get a closed low to form by this Friday afternoon over the Bahamas. So you'll notice, here we go, we've got one closed isobar here. So at this point, again, finally seeing an actual center of circulation and probably a tropical depression at this point, again, this Friday afternoon. So we're still 5 days from actual core development of the system. But what happens next on the European model is this begins to slowly strengthen, but strengthen nonetheless over the northern Bahamas. And by the time we're getting into this Saturday afternoon, this is just off the coast of Florida, kind of at the same latitude of Miami and even up towards Lake Okeechobee. And again, slowly strengthening. Now, eventually what happens is this continues its march north. It doesn't get much stronger, but doesn't really weaken much either, and eventually makes a landfall or close to it there along the Carolina coastline, somewhere between Wilmington and the Outer Banks, about a week from today. So that's the latest European model, and then eventually this kind of rides up the coast and then really strengthens, although staying offshore. But again, I don't want to show you anything really past the southeast coastline. So again, this is the latest European. I think the European, like I said earlier, has been the most consistent. It has really stuck to its guns. Same story for the ensembles. In fact, the European was the first of all the models to really even sniff out the system developing. So I'm, kind of leaning towards the European camp a little bit, and I'll show you, why also here whenever we look at the ensembles. But again, this is just one model run, one output, and also a distinct possibility. So we'll definitely consider that and keep that in our back pocket. Let's also take a look at the Canadian model here. And again, we'll start on Wednesday, like we did with the European. So again, same story. Here's that wave, still an open wave Wednesday morning and afternoon to end out July here near the Northern Antilles. And eventually takes a similar route like the European does to start off, gets near Hispaniola, and then this is where things change. Again, still an open wave at this point as it's just north of Hispaniola, but then the Canadian keeps it a little bit further south. At this point, by the time we were getting to Friday on the European model, we were beginning to see that curve north, while the Canadian kind of keeps this, heading towards the gap between Cuba and Florida. So again, at this point, this is where the models diverge a little bit, but they both do develop this into a center of low pressure. And the Canadian, again, developing that low pressure just off the southwest coast of Florida here near Fort Myers, Naples, and near the Keys here, and eventually rides it right up the west coast of Florida and brings it into the Big Bend, again, about a week from now into next Monday. So, different possibilities here between both of these models, but they both show some sort of tropical system developing and at least getting close, if not making landfall, somewhere in the southeast coast from Florida up through North Carolina. And I think right now, that is something that we are confident in, is if we do see direct impacts in the United States, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, those are the states to watch mostly. I think really any shot of this getting out near Texas or Louisiana or even Mississippi are pretty low at this point. So that is the good news for you folks out there who have already been impacted by Beryl. This looks like more of a eastern side of the United States problem. So again, obviously not good for those of us in the east, but at least a break for those of us in Texas who have already seen so much rainfall the past week or two. Really don't need any more. All right, that is the Canadian model. Now let's take a look at the GFS model, and we will kind of do the same thing here starting at Wednesday. Here's that wave of low pressures trying to get its act together near the Northern Antilles, again, just 48 hours from now. And eventually we bring this ahead into time, and we're still dealing with just an open wave as we get into Friday and even into Saturday. But you'll notice the track is much more similar to the Canadian model here, kind of trying to shoot the gap between Cuba and Florida as still just an open tropical wave, not any, low pressure forming here. And it kind of stays that way. In fact, the GFS really struggles to develop any sort of actual storm here. Again, kind of trying to maybe close some isobars off here, but if anything, it would still be more of a tropical wave than seeing any kind of impacts that you would normally see from a tropical storm or especially a hurricane. So again, latest GFS operational run is with the Canadian on track, but doesn't develop really anything, at least on the operational side of things. Now, again, we'll take a look at the ensembles here in a moment, but let's take a look at one more model. This is the Icon model, or our German model. I say our German model. It's not ours, obviously, if it's the German model, but you get the point nonetheless. Also, the Icon, is going to look a little different on this map, but gets the same point across. Starting Wednesday, going into Thursday, again, here is that open wave just north of the Antilles. So all the models agree with that. By the time we're at Wednesday, this will be situated in that area. But then we move this ahead into time with the Icon. And actually, no, I just realized I'm going to need to move this back to the 0Z so we can actually get the full picture here. Sorry. 1 second. All right, there we go. So again, we move this ahead into time, and still nothing really by Friday, but we get towards Saturday, and here we go. Much like the Canadian, much like the GFS track-wise, we get finally a center of low pressure to form at the surface here near the Keys between Cuba and South Florida. And then the Icon, much like the Canadian, really kind of show the exact same picture here. A tropical storm riding up the west coast of Florida and eventually making landfall into the Big Bend. So that's 3 of the 4 models that bring this into the extreme western Gulf here, right along the coast of Florida. But I'm still on the European camp, and you might be wondering, well, if 3 out of the 4 models, 75% of the guidance here says this is, a Gulf storm, why are you thinking the Atlantic? Well, this is why. Again, as I said in the beginning, the European has been the most consistent out of any of our models. It has been really, keeping to its guns here. It's said the same thing for the past couple of days now. And if we look at the ensembles, just about all of these curve this before getting to Florida. And really, if anything, most of these ensembles are a fish storm. Now, that's not to say that this absolutely will be a fish storm. Again, we haven't even formed the center of low pressure, so things are bound to change one way or the other. But again, the European has just been really consistent recently with this thought process. And even if we look at the GFS ensembles, you'll notice a lot of these ensemble members are on the Atlantic side compared to, again, some in the Gulf side. But whenever you add the European and the GFS ensembles together, we're really running about 80% in the Atlantic and only about 20% in the Gulf. So again, that's kind of why I'm leaning towards that side of things. Now, that isn't to say that there won't be any impacts to the United States because of this. In fact, like the operational European run showed, this could very well curve slowly and eventually make landfall up into the Carolinas. In fact, it could even, push a little bit further east and maybe make landfall somewhere into Florida or South Carolina. Again, we're still about a week away from landfall. So these models are going to change some. They're going to shift one way or the other, especially once we finally get this thing to develop some low pressure near Hispaniola or Cuba. But right now, again, I would say about 70% confidence this is more of an Atlantic storm than a Gulf storm. But again, that leaves that 30% chance that this could be a Gulf system. In fact, again, should this, push a little bit further south and maybe that center doesn't really develop till it gets towards Cuba here, then yeah, this very well could be a Gulf storm and could ride up into the west coast of Florida and eventually bring some inland impacts towards Georgia and the Carolinas. It's a very real possibility, but again, we've got plenty of time to figure it out, and we will continue to monitor things, obviously, over the next couple of days. Now, one more thing I will show you here is the steering currents. You might be wondering, well, what is causing this to eventually shift one way or the other? Well, it all has to do with the steering currents and the middle layers of the atmosphere. And this is our 500 millibar height anomaly map. Also, I'm going to take a sip of coffee real quick. So I know, sorry, give me 1 second. All right, coffee ingested. We are ready to go for the rest of the video. Sorry about that. Okay, so again, steering currents for this storm. Taking a look at 500 millibars, this is really what's going to decide where this curves. Again, does this curve near the Gulf, or does this curve near the Atlantic? These are the steering currents, and obviously, like I also mentioned earlier, where exactly does the center of low pressure form is also going to matter. But here is what is eventually going to turn this thing north, and it's these isobars right in here getting into this Friday and Saturday up into the Ohio River Valley. Again, we've got a little bit of a trough here, and again, this is bringing the wind in this direction. So as this storm, wherever it is, kind of moves near this, it's going to eventually get pulled up and then pushed back out in the northeastern direction. Now, again, that could happen like the European has shown, and it could be out to sea like this. It could be over and up into the Carolinas like this. It could wait till the Gulf and then do it like this. All those possibilities are still on the table, but just know eventually this is going to turn up towards the north and east. And again, that's kind of why I would say if you're out here near Texas or Louisiana, Mississippi, probably even Alabama, in all honesty, the chances of direct impacts from this are pretty limited. So that is good news for you folks. And we will keep on watching that. And again, that's the latest on potential future Debbie, which again would be the next name on the list. All right, again, that's not the only thing we're having to worry about. We have severe weather to monitor here in the United States. And again, a lot of folks with that potential for severe weather today, tomorrow, and probably even Wednesday as well. So we've got 2 slight risks up today at the time I'm recording this. By the time you're watching this, I'm sure something's been changed, but the general idea will be the same. Again, one area of enhanced storms, are likely up near the Dakotas and Nebraska. Another area right through the Ohio River Valley from Louisville, Evansville there, and even into southern Illinois. But also, something that is new today is this marginal risk has been expanded all the way down into portions of the Carolinas. So that is something we didn't have yesterday. We do have today. Main threats today will be strong straight line winds anywhere that you see that green. In fact, also, I forgot to mention, we also have a small marginal risk up here into New Jersey, into Philadelphia, Dover, and even into the Baltimore area. So watching that area as well. But the tornado threat today, again, is non-zero. In fact, we have a couple of places that could have a higher threat of tornadoes, one into the Ohio River Valley, another back up into the Dakotas. But honestly, if, again, you're anywhere in this green area, do not completely rule out a tornado. It's a non-zero threat, as we call it, meaning it's not quite 2% within a 25-mile radius, but it's also not 0%. So you got to, either way, kind of have a way to get those watches and warnings if you're under any threat level today, but again, especially in these green areas. Now, we bring this into tomorrow, Tuesday, the 30th of July. Again, another similar area here to watch out for. Again, kind of this corridor here from South Carolina, North Carolina, all the way up through the Dakotas, but an enhanced area of some wind threat there right into the heart of that through Iowa, Illinois, and Missouri as well. Sorry. Again, I guess maybe that coffee didn't completely do the trick. Then we get into Wednesday, though, another area for severe weather, really through much of the Midwest. Again, Minnesota, Iowa, the Dakotas, Nebraska, Kansas City included, Chicago, Columbus, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Milwaukee. Again, I could keep naming cities here, but you get the point. If you're in that green area, and especially that yellow area on this map, need to have a way to get watches, warnings, and advisors as well should any flooding occur. So again, need to watch out for that for sure here in that time frame. Now, I'm going to actually kind of switch up the order of our maps a little bit here and talk about this next. So why are we seeing this area of severe weather? Well, what is the driving factor? Well, this is a good old-fashioned kind of ring of fire setup that we see often in the summertime. And what I mean by that is here's our ring, here's our high pressure, and again, I'll draw the ring around it. And then here is the fire that goes around that ring, kind of right through these isobars here. You'll notice, in fact, I could probably draw that a little bit better. These storms like to go right with the flow here. And we're seeing a lot of that flow specifically out of the Dakotas here. So what's happening is we're getting another kind of trough in here, trough axis. That's leading to some divergence aloft here. So we're seeing a lot of stormy weather kind of wanting to form here. And then it's riding down that ridge or down that ring of fire, and then also kind of getting funneled into this low pressure. So it's just a big old kind of conveyor belt of energy here that we're seeing. And that will be the theme through the next couple of days here. You'll notice even though the colors on your map change a little bit, the general thought process doesn't. Again, here's that trough. We're going to get storms to form here because of it, and then ride right back down these isobars towards the southeast and the Ohio River Valley. Again, through at least the middle of this week, probably even after that a little bit. And then here we go into this weekend. Here is that trough that is up currently in the Pacific Northwest, getting down into the Ohio River Valley. And this is that same trough that would eventually pick up potential Debbie going into the weekend. So again, one of the reasons I love weather is everything's connected here. The same reason we're going to see some severe weather now is going to be the same reason that many of us probably, get saved from Debbie. Not to say everyone will. But again, it's all kind of connected here. So super cool how the weather works. I love it. And I'm sure many of you do too, if you're willing to sit here and watch me talk about it for going on 20 minutes now. So anyway, let's take a look at some future radar here, some potential storm timelines here. And we'll move this ahead into starting this afternoon. Again, currently on radar, and I should have pulled up current radar, but this does a pretty good job at showing it. We've got one area of storminess up into the northeast. Again, that's that low pressure I talked about. Another big area of stormy weather into the southeast. And also, we again have that complex of storms up into here right now, which isn't showing up great on this model, but trust me, it's there. Now, I will also mention with these Ring of Fire setups, generally the mesoscale models, which is what you're looking at now, kind of struggle a little bit with the timing and the intensity of these storms. So do not take this verbatim. Just know if you're in that threat area, be prepared for some storms this afternoon and overnight tonight. Now, here we go. Into this afternoon and evening, you'll notice getting towards sunset, specifically, one area we're going to want to watch is right up into here as a potential squall line forms. And we do have derecho potential with this within the next couple of days with this setup. It is known to produce derechos. But again, they're so difficult to forecast ahead of time until they really form. But no, possibility is there that something like that could form in the next couple of days. Also, some showers and storms throughout the Carolinas, specifically the Charlotte area. Could see some of that this afternoon, evening. Also, the Northeast seeing some showers develop. Less of a severe weather threat there, except for, again, kind of in here into the Philadelphia corridor there of I-95. But again, the big threat is going to be this line of storms. Wherever it forms and wherever it goes this evening and overnight tonight. Again, likely through Indiana, Illinois, and portions of Kentucky, as we saw with that slight risk today. That eventually marches southbound overnight tonight and waking up tomorrow could still be around. Do not be surprised to still see it hanging around the Nashville area and eventually maybe even trying to get further south and east than that as it follows that flow. Again, the models sometimes struggle with exactly how long these storms are able to hold on. But either way, tomorrow afternoon into Tuesday, we're going to do it all again with some more of these storms developing and these complexes. Again, you'll notice one up here in Iowa, another one showing up here down towards South Carolina. We'll have to watch that for the potential, but also some showers and storms up into the northeast. So again, many of us getting in on this very summertime pattern of strong winds with squall lines. Again, good old-fashioned shelf clouds. You'll see, can't rule out a couple tornadoes either, though. And again, that squall line potentially continuing to advance and get stronger during the overnight hours of Tuesday into Wednesday here through portions of the Midwest and the Ohio River Valley. And then that eventually gets us into Wednesday afternoon here, where again, we'll probably see more of the same, but that's as far out as this model goes. And one thing I will mention that is unfortunately fueling these storms is that muggy air. Again, that is leading to some instability at the surface and really allowing those air parcels to want to rise. And that is what is ultimately leading to these big squall lines. And again, dew points, they are downright nasty here. And I'll bring this even into Wednesday afternoon. And again, at about 5 or so here, the GFS generally underdoes the dew point, not underdoes. Underdoes the dew point. So again, add 3 to 5 degrees here. Just about all of us are up into the 70s. Isolated spots probably up into the 80s even here where these storms are developing. And again, that is really like rocket fuel for these storms. And that's why we're expecting severe weather this week. And again, these dew point values are not going anywhere. Maybe a little bit of a break from the thunderstorm activity as that trough that again will deflect whatever tropical system we have, or I shouldn't say deflect, but pick it up and move it wherever it's at. Behind that, going later on into this weekend, could see some drier air for some folks. But again, also the tropics will have a big play in exactly who that is. It sees a drier air and who potentially is getting tropical impacts with more muggy air. So again, a lot to watch here this week, from the tropics to severe weather to very summer-like conditions for some folks. But again, we're getting close to August now. Last couple of days of July, expect things to continue to stay active, especially in the tropics in August. I think right now what we're seeing is really just an appetizer for the middle of the month, where I think things will really pick up for a lot of folks here out towards the Atlantic. So again, I appreciate y'all hanging in there. Thank you for watching. Again, if you haven't already subscribed, definitely consider doing so. Like the video and comment. Let me know where you're watching from and what you're seeing in your neck of the woods. But with that said, have a great rest of your Monday, and I'll see you all tomorrow.